You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello, Mike Torville here from Healing Voices Project. We're digging deep in the archives today to bring you back Kevin Lebeau, who I call the ultimate survivor, because I think Kevin's story is worth listening to, even if you listen to it twice. Kevin survived drug and alcohol addiction, homelessness, a life-threatening accident that put him in the hospital for the better part of a year, and then a heart transplant on top of that. And last but not least, Kevin even survived an all-out brawl with Chuck E. Cheese. Yep. Listen to Kevin's story here. Thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories of addiction, grief, recovery, and courage. This week, as a guest, I have Kevin Lebeau, who's become a good friend over the past year or so. Yeah. And today we're dedicating this episode to Kevin's dad, Johnny Paleface. And Johnny... and Kevin, obviously, you've had a lot that you worked with your dad, and we'll get into that. But in honor of Johnny, we're asking you to donate to Hope for Holyoke. And it's www.ganderascenter.org. Thank you very much. So, thank you. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
If there's one thing I can say about you, is you are the ultimate survivor. Would you say that?
Oh, I'm still trying, Turvey, man.
Right. But you've got some things you've gone through that a lot of people would never have lasted through.
Well, I guess you don't know that until you find that some sort of as they taught us in the program of AA and through Christianity, a higher power, because by myself I would never be here. And they put certain people in your life that you could never imagine that would even stick around through most of it. My wife's one of the best they've ever made. Kathy is the ultimate individual, spouse, companion, friend that you could ever ask for. And I believe that many husbands will say that. Mm-hmm. And I know that to be true. We have our good times and our bad times. Mainly, I can count on one hand the amount of arguments we've gotten into, but during my years in the hospital and other health issues, we've had some frustrations and disappointments, but through it all, God's been good to us, man. He's been really good to us, and we're fortunate, and we continue to strive forward, and that's by doing what we do. We both are involved in our 12-step program. Mm-hmm. We're both, I'm an employee at the center. I do this stuff. I do audio-visual, and I love it. I worked in TV forever, and my television background allowed them during the pandemic to get some equipment, and we started doing that. My wife has been at the same job for 26 years, and it's just been a crazy ride. And I guess there's been from getting sober to knee operations to hockey playing to heart transplant, and then finally the car accident, which really set us back for the last 4 years. But we keep moving forward. That's what we've been taught. My dad's always said, if you're not moving, you're not moving. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've always done.
Bob Dylan had a variation of that.
Yeah.
He said, he's not busy being born, is busy dying. So that sticks with me. we're about the same age, and we have a longer
You're
history.
32?
Yeah, you could tell. 32 times 2 almost.
Yeah, there we go.
But we've gotten to know each other more over the past year or so, but even before that, I think we played hockey with each other, or against each other, probably.
We probably did during the years that we went to the same hockey school.
Right,
we found that out.
That was in 1970.
Pecumtuck Hockey School
right.
in Chicopee, and used to love playing all the time.
Yeah.
And then that went away after time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a game that we last forever, and I didn't. My legs gave out, such as probably.
Yeah, my knees gave out.
You skated this year, though. That's a big difference than me.
I did. Not competitively.
No, you have a pond.
Just leisurely.
Little pond hockey.
Yeah. And I needed my stick to hold me up.
I can barely get down the hall to come in the door.
Well, you've been through a lot, so.
Yeah.
Well, and when you go back to your teens and your 20s, where a lot of this started and the seeds of different addictions took place, you want to talk a little bit about that, with your how it all started?
It's a crazy thing because, alcohol wasn't very big in my family, but it was one of those things that were mostly a social thing.
Yeah.
I was an egghead when I first, I loved school. I loved science. I had my own chemistry lab. I was at the top of the list every year in my class, and then all of a sudden, hockey took a second interest, and these kids brought this stuff out on a table and said, "Try some." And when you press my foot, my mouth opens, and things started to happen. And at that time, you forget the importance of other things, and that's why they call it an addiction, because it is so. It grabs you slowly. There's a progression to this.
Mm-hmm.
And now practices didn't matter, and ball didn't matter, baseball. And my Uncle Jimmy, who was a great influence in my baseball career, was a pitcher. And I remember him telling me, never lose focus on what you love. And he loved playing baseball. And and he was in the Chicago Cubs farm system. He was ready to go in, and my Auntie Pat got pregnant. And he was 16 and she was 15. So he did the right thing. And he lost that whole thing. And every Christmas he'd get drunk, and I could have been a contender, And it bothered him forever. Until the day he died. He'd talk about it every year. He'd pull the contracts out. But he wasn't an alcoholic. It was his time to do those things. At that time, it was like his own little area to feel that remorse. But he never, ever said that he did the wrong thing. And I can't say that, because I did the wrong things. I gave up on things that could have made me something that my parents would be proud of, instead of local man on the front of the newspaper all the time. Local man does this, or local man does that. And I wasn't one where, my mom would go through the grocery store and everyone said, "Hey, your kid's doing great." They'd do the old turnaround and try not to talk. And I didn't really think of how that affected her in all those years, and infected my family and my father and everything, and that I would turn into something that I would never ever think I would be.
Well, you didn't think about them. You thought about yourself, right?
Yeah, I was a self-centered, selfish individual.
Yeah, and that's not unusual.
No. It becomes a different thing later on in progression, that we rely upon each other as alkies. When I started living under the bridge, we'll go up to there right now, that we became a community, because we were all the same.
The under the bridge community.
Right.
That was just your new family.
The Amana condos, the cardboard boxes, and then thank God I wasn't there that long, but that's how the progression gets you from being a kid with aspirations of being a superstar in his own mind to losing every friend you thought you had to only gain friends that you wish you never had, to taking hostages in your life. And I loved my wife at the time. In AA, you can say that, the wife at the time, because we go through so many, because they can only put up with you for so long.
Yeah.
And then they got your game.
Well, you said something about losing interests in things. It could be sports or hobbies that you start to lose interest because it's not as much a priority, because what becomes the priority is the drugs or the drinking, right?
Alcohol.
But it's not only losing interest in those activities, but it's in people, in the connection to the people. You no longer care about this person or this person like you did, because you become more selfish, and you begin to detach emotionally from people as well as your other activities.
Al-Anon tells you that you detach with love, and that's how they taught. And my dad was in AA. He died at 97, and he would have been 60 years sober. But he knew deep down inside he could not do anything. He had no human power to relieve what I had, and that I had to go through that pain. And he knew also that I was either going to make it or I was going to die. And he was already ready for that. My mom was an Irish woman off the boat, and she talked with a bro and hit you with a stick, and she'd go through rosary beads like Amazon would send them today in bundles, and she'd just wear them out. And I'd come through the door staggering and dropping the drugs on the ground, and she'd go, you drop that, and I'd hear her cry. And at the end, those tears didn't affect me. And I'm blessed. And I know we're playing ping pong with this story a little bit, but I'm really blessed to have been able to kneel by her side when she passed. And I wouldn't have done that unless my dad gave me a good start and allowed me to do that, and introduced me to some quality people. So at the beginning, the progression takes over, and now I'm in my 5th year of high school. And then I'm in my 6th year of high school, and I'm getting thrown out of some places. I'm driving my car across the soccer field at Granby High, and they they don't like that. And they told me they didn't like that. And so the police officers escorted me home, and I was lucky because my dad was in the police department in South Hadley, and so every day he'd look at me and say, another favor, another favor, another favor, and they'd bring you home back then. And I'm hammered or driving on the wrong side of the streets, and it's just becoming a habit where now I'm an annoyance. I'm not. I'm more of a dependent on him. And finally, he said, "That's enough."
And this is in your 20s?
Yeah, I'm just about 20, 21 years old. I'm working still through all this, so I'm functional. But also, I'm becoming unfunctional to the sense that not long after that, I'm walking in with 14 W-2 forms, and I got a drawer full of resumes from, pumping gas to rocket scientist. I'm a chameleon. I could change my colors at any time. And I could probably bullcrap my way through enough to get by, because I wasn't stupid. And then all of a sudden, it just started to end. I remember just losing everything, losing my jobs, my cars, and then I had to go out and search for the ultimate person that would make that all happen again. And she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I don't regret anything, because we've got two beautiful children who today understand what this is all about. I was able to tell them my story.
How's your relationship with them now?
It's not the greatest, I'll be honest with you. And I pray every day that in time they will be able to make their own decisions. My son's a knucklehead like me, at his age, and my daughter has a family and is a great mother, and it's hard, but we've worked through some things, and we communicate a little bit on Facebook, but face-to-face stuff, she still holds some resentment. So when you think you're out there not hurting anybody, it comes back to you 100 times. And then, why won't you talk to me? Why? And I should be going, I don't blame you, man. I don't blame any of you.
Yeah. Well, you think also, too, with your parents, and it's reversing the roles, and you sort of understand from both perspectives now.
Yeah, my dad got sober in 1960. I was born in 1960, so I guess I sobered him up. And we had a great life. We always had what we needed, and sometimes what we didn't need. We were always taught, though, to work. If I needed a hockey stick, I had a paper route. And we'd schluck over to Holyoke Sporting Goods and pick a $5 one out of the box. But we worked for everything. But then again, my dad was consumed in other areas, and he never came to one of my hockey games in all those years. I don't know why. Maybe that caused a portion in me. I've been working on that to not really care about certain things. And so I went, even after my son started to play, he fell down, he cried, he didn't want to do it anymore. And I said, okay, you don't have to play this. So we played baseball, and I went to the games, and the divorced family routine, and one there you are on your side, and there they are on their side, and you don't talk to each other, and the kids don't know where to go, and it's tough. It is tough, and so we made it through all of that, and my ex-wife and I are good friends today.
That's great. Yeah. Really.
Yeah.
And then that helps with the kids, obviously. That hopefully helps to connect.
There was a day she came back, she pulled in the driveway, and we were talking, and she said, come home. And I said, no. I said, scars are too deep. You could never trust me again, and I wouldn't put you through that if I had a relapse. And I said, you'll find someone much better than I. And she did. Her husband, Marty, is a fabulous guy. He's a hard worker and entrepreneur. He's a chef, and he's everything that I could never have been. And now I'm happy for them when I was mad before, because I had no recovery in my life.
Plus, you're human, and it was your wife, it was your ex-wife. That's hard. Now, you told me a story when you and your wife were separated, and you hadn't seen the kids for a while, and you wanted to prove that you could handle the kids for a day. This was your outing at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, holy mackerel. That's a tough one to get through sometimes, because when I think about it, it's the insanity.
Well, and why I was asking about it, because it sort of shows how sometimes when you hadn't been drinking for a little while. Yeah. And then something, even after a period of sobriety, after a period of saying, I can prove to my kids and my wife that I can handle this and I'm past all that. But then it takes just a tiny little trigger. And
it's a blink of an eye. It's a friend of mine in AA used to say, snap your finger and that's how fast it can go away.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so diligent every day on what we do and how we do it. And we stay in the middle and not on the edge to fall off. And my kids were taken away from me. I was living in a condemned building, drinking Sterno out of cheesecloths and stealing pretzels off of bars. I was stealing the vanilla extract out of the stores. That's why they put them behind the counter now. And NyQuil on the rocks, and my life was right at the bottom of bottoms. And then one day I woke up, and this thing goes, I want to see my children. I got nothing, but I'm going to try. And that's when I went on that abstinence, as we would say.
And how long were you?
Probably 6 months.
Okay. Well,
I was I got a job at Rocky's Ace Hardware, and I was stocking shelves for $6 an hour, and working in some of the departments, and they would the government would take 99% of that for my children, and I did not care or take it all, and I'd walk everywhere I went or took the bus. And one day I felt that, you know what, I have a place to live now. I'm doing all right. I feel okay. But deep down inside, I'm white knuckling and biting my fingernails and isolating myself because I don't want to go into public. If I go near a place I used to drink in, I know I'm going in there. So I'm really faking myself out. And here I am with a dad at home with 30 years of recovery. All I had to do is say, hey, Dad, how do I do it? Instead, I'm wearing T-shirts that say AA is a great place to pick up drunk chicks, and you know, just trying to be that a-hole. Hey, Dad, look at me, not like you. And what happened is that I got to take them on a one-day vacation, and I brought them to Chuck E. Cheese.
But now this took some convincing.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It was not easy getting her to say yes. I borrowed $40 and a car, and I got them in the door, and they got the bracelets on, and they got the tokens. I got the last token. I usually carry it with me. The cop gave me, and I'll get to that. But I went right up to the counter, and I went, I'll have a pizza and big sign, beer. And the beer was in much better letters than the soda. So I guess they want you to see that.
But I think, and let's go back a little bit. You're taking the kids to Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
You get this pass to do this.
Yep.
After some convincing, what could go wrong at Chuck E. Cheese?
Well, what could go wrong was that I saw that word beer up on the thing, and I said to myself, and I remember this clearly, I'm not a blackout drinker, which would have been better, is that I can do this. I can have one. I've earned it. And I asked for one. And I sat down and I gave them the tokens, and they went and played, and I drank that one. Then I went up and got another one, and I pounded. I never drank beer for taste, only effect. I never even knew it had taste at one time. And then I'm drinking more, and then I got a pitcher because I'm afraid now. Fear is setting in that you're looking at me because I went up 3 times. So I might as well bite it in the pitchers and
save yourself some trips. Yeah.
Boom. And next thing I know, I'm laying on my head's on the table. Excuse me, sound effect.
Woke us up.
Yeah, and it's on the table, and I'm something's hitting my arm, and it's this mouse with this giant paw, and I said, I don't.
One of the Chuck E. Cheese characters.
It was Chuck E. Cheese himself with the big giant paws, and he had my kids, and he says, "Are these yours?" And I said, 1, don't touch me, and 2, I'm trying to focus to see what those are my children, and he hit me again, and silence and anger. There's nothing in between. There's no conversation. There's just me diving upon him in the middle of this giant floor, and I'm in an all-out brawl with this mouse, and I'm getting my butt kicked because he's hitting me with these giant plastic paws, and I got in a few good shots, and then
but just the spectacle of that.
Oh God, I didn't even know the place is packed. I don't even care who's watching me. And all of a sudden, I got up and I started beating on him. And I'm pulling his whiskers out and the plastic nose. And next thing I know, I got dizzy and he got back on top. And next thing I know, I'm waking up to a police officer putting handcuffs on me. And I'm going to jail for assault and battery on a mouse. And so they take me in this room, and I put the quarter in the jackpot Jesus machine, hoping I get 3 halos, and I didn't get the 3 halos. And this cop who gave me this coin is in that room, and he handed me this last token. He says, "This is all that's left from what you did. Please keep this." And I still have it. And he said, "You're a disgrace to your family and friends." I think he was in recovery because he used that language. And he says, "You got one phone call, and I'm taking you to jail." Well, I call my dad, and I go, "Hey, Dad, I'm in Chuck E. Cheese. I got arrested." He said, "Go sober up." And he was going to hang up. And I said, "Please don't hang up." Bubble snot, everything. Instant sobriety at that point in time. Yep. Your mind sobers up. And he says, "What happened?" And I told him, and they'll let me go if you pay $587.18 for the head. And he talked to the guy, and he talked to the cop, and cops talked to cops. And so he told me not to move. And the only reason he'd come if Karen came too. And I said, "Don't call her, man. She has to. She's got to bring her children home." And I knew that it was over. At that point in time, I knew it was over. She was going to come, take those children away from me for the rest of my life. And a funny thing about it was that I wish I stopped that day, but that was a great thing to go on for a couple more days and use that story for free drinks all over the place until I just couldn't do it anymore. I fell on my face, and I lost everything again.
Yeah. And with that story, I mean, I hate to say there's a comedic aspect to that, because I just picture it and you rolling around with this mouse, and I think, okay, but it's aside from that, it's not funny. But the thing is, that one finger snapping moment where you see that sign, you say, "I'll just have one," and you think about that split decision and how it affected the rest of your life, the rest of your kids' life. Because it's traumatizing for everybody. It's traumatizing for you, for the kids, and that doesn't go away.
And that's important that you say that, because they were laughing
at first,
thinking it was a show.
Oh.
Until they put them in the other room and they separated us. And I never once, and this is honest to God, and I'm ashamed of this, I didn't think of them. I thought, how I get out of trouble. I never thought of them. And that's why that cop thought I was a disgrace. He said, "You don't even know where your kids are right now, and you really don't care." And he was right. And he looked at me, and you can see that in someone's eyes.
Yeah.
So the long story short, I had to go back and make amends to that mouse, and later on in recovery, because it was a closure. I'm done with it. It's a funny story from the podium, but not from my sponsor's point of view. And so I'm just moving ahead, because it's important that I did that, because I'll always forget to say that.
Yeah.
So I walked in, and I said to the manager, "I need to talk to your mouse." And he looked at me like I had 7 heads. And I'm looking around for wanted posters, and I've got a restraining order against me in every Chuck E. Cheese in the world at this time. And I find out I'm not the only one that has ever done this and gotten into these problems and at these restaurants. And I'm going, I says, "I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And through the 12 steps, I need to make amends for the wreckage of my past." And so he goes, "Go for it, man, because I remember you." And I said, Not a great remembrance, but thank you. And I walked up to the mouse and he said, remember, it's not the same person. It doesn't matter. There's a grumpy old guy sitting on a car out there who wants to see me do this. And I need to do this. And that was my sponsor, Abe. So I walked up to the mouse and I went, if I've harmed you in any way or rented space in your mind, I truly regret my actions. And I hope to do better. And this, through the cage, I hear, what the are you talking about? And I went, wow, am I a dope? And I walk out, and this is how experience can benefit others. And this is why I feel that any type of recovery center or programs or 12 steps really need to be in someone's life early on, and maybe forever. For me, it's forever. Because he looked at me and he says, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like a, hole. And he said, you didn't that day with 200 people around you in the middle of a floor while your children cried. And he could just say that in a way that just says, okay, man, that's why I'm here today. I didn't want to go to that place. So that's my experience through the whole program of AA. I'm living under a cardboard box, and if I always said, well, I could survive anywhere. Try surviving in those streets. That's a war zone. You team up. One guy goes out, one guy sleeps, one guy goes out. You don't cross can lines. A friend of mine had his throat cut across from the Civic Center over a bottle of wine. And those are the things that I remember. And I remember putting a nickel in the phone and being done. I got my shopping cart and it's all hooked up, I got one of the top shelf Cadillacs of shopping carts, And that's where my life was.
You remember there's a picture of you holding that sign.
Money needed for alcohol research.
Right.
And I made a lot of dough with that in the middle of Springfield. But I was in the war zone, and I've had it. I was done.
You said you made a phone call.
I made a phone call to my dad, and he answered the phone, and I said, Dad, don't hang up. I need your help. And I just stole his television about 2 weeks before, and when he was on the phone, he made sure he told me that I left the remote behind like an idiot. And he says, you're not even a great thief, never mind a drunk. And I laughed for a moment, and then he says, your mom's dying. And and she was. She had terminal cancer. I didn't really care. All I cared about was a $20 bill she taped to the door every so often. And at the end, they told me not to come back. Never come here ever again. And he came and got me. And he came and got me as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He didn't come and got me because he was my dad or he loved me or he missed me. He came and got me because there was some portion of his life that became a responsibility pledge. When anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And he pulls up in the car, and I'm scared to get in. He says, kid, get your butt in the car. And I said, where are we going? He says, I'm taking you somewhere. And he took me to Corey Hill in Westfield. At the time, it was a rehab center. And the funny thing about that was I'm in the car, and I keep saying, I'm sorry, Dad. I'll do better. I'm sorry. He says, don't call me Dad. I'm not your father. I'm a member of AA, and I'm here because somebody did this for me. If I was your dad, I'd put a bullet in your head. And I lost it. And he said, I'm serious. And he says, when you get out of here, you better pray that your mom's still around so you can go talk to her. And I spent 28 days in Corey Hill. And it was old Army cots. And I remember going in, and they're going through my American Tourister glad bag luggage, and with the yellow handles. I had it made. And they're taking things out and telling you can't bring this in, and they're bringing me to a room, and a kid comes in, and he's got like a Thurston Howell accent to him. These accommodations are appalling. And I'm going, these are 5-star hotels for me, pal. Me and you, we're going. And we became best friends at the end, because we worked on that barriers that kept it from Yale to jail, from the outhouse to the penthouse. That's true. Doesn't matter where you come from. And I remember getting out of there, and I was scared when I left, scared. And instead of going home to see my mom, my dad took me to the noontime meeting in Holyoke. And I thought I'd get a whole new wardrobe to go out in. No, I had a red shoe and a white shoe on, and I've had the clothes I got out of the Goodwill box, because we used to sleep in them. And I went to this meeting, and this man, I'm leaning against a wall, and this guy comes out, and his name's Chip. He's gone now, God bless him. He saved my life, along with many others. And he says, what's going on, kid? And I said, what's this kid stuff, by the way? And that's what the old-timers used to call the newcomers. And he says, you want to talk? And I said, yeah. And we talked. He talked to me on a level that was equal. He wasn't up here, and he didn't make me feel inferior. And because I probably would have ran to what I know that works, and that's a package store and alcohol. Whether I got to steal it, pay for it, do whatever I got to do, I'm going to ingest it because it takes away that pain. And he just talked to me. I remember him giving me a job, cleaning up and typing a little newspaper, and I come to work one day, and there's a shoe box, and I open it up, and it's a brand new pair of sneakers, man. And it says you can't go a lot of miles on a bad set of tires. And I'll never forget that, because I wept, because how could someone be so nice to me when I'm such a bad person? And I learned that I'm not bad, I'm sick. I'm a sick guy. So I met my sponsor that day, Abe.
You mentioned Abe, and your initial relationship with Abe went off to a rough start, right?
Yeah, he gave me the speech, which this is a PG audience, so I won't really give you too much, but I was introduced to him, and he wanted me to do certain things. So we went to this restaurant, the old Holyoke Diner across, next to the Ivory Billiards. And he says, do you want to get sober? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, don't slide your ATM card down the crack of my and think $20 bills are going to come flying out of my mouth. I'm not a patient, bartender, doctor, lawyer, financial advisor, marriage counselor, and employment agent. I'm not a taxi cab, which is going to pick you up every night and get you where you got to go. And I'm certainly not going to come and make you a hot cup of cocoa at midnight because you're having a moment. You want to be a man, and you want to live, and you want to live sober, then you follow what I do, because I'm pretty good at it. I know it. And then he had yellow pages, and he flew them across the room on the table, and he said, all that other stuff's in there. I know this big book, and I'm going to give you this. You want that other stuff? Look it up. And I followed those rules, and then I had to walk to Belchertown.
Well, he told you to meet him at 9 o'clock.
Meet him at 9 o'clock, and he lived up in Lord Jeff Apartments in Belchertown, and I was sleeping on the floor over in Chicopee on James Street Hill. And he says, can you be there tomorrow at 9? I says, can you pick me up? He said, well, you just forgot what we're talking about. And I went, well, I got to walk. He says, well, leave early.
Chicopee to Belchertown.
Yeah, it was in 90-degree weather. So I said, okay, and I did it. And I got there 5 after 9, and I banged on the door, and he opened it up, and he said, "Kevin, I told you 9 o'clock." And he closed the door. And I went, what the is wrong with this dude, man? Boom, boom, boom. I'm here. He said, "I told you 9 o'clock. Come back tomorrow." And I banged again. He said, "Do it again, and I'll call the police." And I went home, and every word under my breath we're not going to be able to say on TV. But George Carlin said them perfectly at one time. And all the way home. And I said, I'm going to go back there in spite. And I did. And I was early. I said 9 o'clock. It's 5 of 9. I said, yesterday I'm late, today I'm early. And he slammed the door in my face again. And he had this method. It was all a method of breaking you, to making you realize something. And Abe was a Native American, such as myself, and he also practiced Buddhism. And he had an altar, and I learned that after that he prayed before each person came in the door to respect them. So 9 o'clock, I got the Mickey Mouse watch on, and he opens up. "Hey, how you doing, Kev? Nice to see you, man. Come on in." And I
Like
went,
nothing ever happened.
I went, "What the hell's wrong with you? Are you a psycho?" And he says, "Kid, let me tell you something. The world doesn't revolve around you. You think it does. If you thought the world revolved around you so great, you wouldn't be under a bridge." And I know that because I lived under one. And he started on me on how I should respect people, respect their time. There's only certain things you can't get back in life. Your words and time. That's it. And at the end of the day, I knew what he was talking about. And it was worth every minute of every hour.
Both trips.
Both trips. And he didn't give me a ride home. And I walked home. And from that day on, I never asked him for one. He picked me up a couple of times, and we'd go to a meeting together. But there would be 5 feet of snow on the ground, and I'm trudging through it, and the car goes by, and a wave, and it's him. And I'd get to the meeting hall over in Holyoke, and he'd go, "Brisk walk today, wasn't it, Kevin? Brisk, very brisk." And I said, "Yes, Abe, it was, but very fulfilling." And I had a lot of spiritual time. You know, he says, "Don't bull crap me. It was cold out there." and I followed the rules.
Yeah.
And I was with him for 15 years until he passed. And I was blessed enough to hold his hand when he died. And circle back to I'm just in AA, and he's helping me out, and my mom's going. It's her time, and I don't know what to do. And so he says, we're going to do what's called a 5th step. You're going to go tell your mom exactly what you did, how you feel, and make amends. And I knelt down by the bed that was in the house, the hospital bed, and I'm looking at her and I'm crying, and I'm going through my head all the stuff I did, all the things I did to her and stole. I stole her pocketbook while she's in a wheelchair, and she has no idea what alcoholism is, but I thought, but she did know what alcoholism was, and she knew about forgiveness and God, because she was a very Catholic woman, and I just said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you." And Abe's behind me, and I pull out this piece of paper, and he grabs it and he crumples it up and throws it on the ground, and he says, "This isn't a script from Hollywood, bro. Start talking from your heart." And I did. And she looked at me, and honest to God, she said, "You're my son. I'll always love you." And she died. So I got up, and I didn't know what to do. And Abe gave me a hug, Not one of these little bro hugs, but I could feel something. He never did it again. But he did it that day. He's told me he loved me twice in his life. And he said, I love you that day. He says, I love you. And you know what to do now. And he walked out the door. He walked by my dad, and my dad waved at him. And he shook his head to my father, which my mom was gone. And my brother from Colorado got up, went in the room, and I went by my father and said, I got to go to a meeting. And my dad said, okay. And I walked over to the noontime group. And when I walked in, he was sitting there, and he said, come here. And I go, what? He says, this is not about you today. So don't make this meeting about you. And I didn't. Nobody in that room knew my mother died except me and him. And so long story short, she's at St. Pat's Church, and I'm sitting in there, and I'm ready to go to the package store right down the street and give up. I'm all done. And all of a sudden, these cars start pulling in. And there's like 35 people from that noontime group that never really knew me. They don't know who I am. I've only been going there for like 3 or 4 weeks. And they all came in, shook my hand, gave me their condolences, and told me they'd be here. I didn't know it. 90% of them, I did not even know their name. And that's how I started to know that this stuff works and how it works.
And how many years now have you been sober?
29.
Wow.
Just as my dad would say, you wake up today and you go to bed tonight. That's long enough for today.
And since then, and we won't have the opportunity today, anyways, we'll have to get into it, but you had a really bad car accident. You had a heart transplant. You had other surgeries that you've come out of, and now I think stronger because of it, to say the least, because you've just gone through a lot of things that you came close to not surviving.
The remarkable thing is that everything led to something that led to something that led to something that needed to be led to. A knee replacement that led to a heart attack, which led to a bypass, which led to 370 days in the hospital waiting for a heart transplant, onto an LVAD, and 18 months on a machine called a left ventricle assist device, and through that, back in it for the transplant, and then from there, getting back on my feet and back to work, and things are going good. And a guy drives down the street, reaches for a cell phone, and forgets that there are people in front of him. And I go through a car window and suffer a level 5 concussion. I couldn't talk, I couldn't write, I had to learn everything all over again. And just when we started to get back our lives, my wife just goes, God, what's going on, man? And it's affected her and her faith. And it's affected my faith. And I'm glad that Dennis and Debbie are in our lives the way they are, because some days I just want to scream at the top of my lungs, why did you do this? But we never know why. All we know is that all the words that go into your book over there save lives, whether they're from someone who has a worse story or a great outcome to a person who doesn't make it. Those words save lives. And if you read those words and you live those words, you relate to those words. Maybe Earth people are a little different until we can show them. And I don't take that wrong, people. I just look at some people who look at us that our disease is different than others, and but it's still a disease. We're good people in a bad situation, and all you got to do is drive down any main street in any city in this country today, and you'll see what's going on, and you'll see how bad it is, and you'll see why it's important that we continue to do this work. There's days we take our work home. You talked about the days that you had crying from writing your book.
Mm-hmm.
We go home and cry for those that we can't save. They just, 1 out of 100 is a coin flip today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough. It's really tough, but every time we're able to read from your book or a story out of that and identify with that and explain it to the new people that are coming in to the center daily just for a cup of coffee or some interaction.
Yeah.
While the other people out there are passing them by or walking across the street, we're grabbing them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our work. That's what God wanted us to become.
You talked about words that save lives. I think a lot of your words will help to save lives too. You do it every day.
We try to do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Some days, the concept of leaving your day, yourself at the door, is where we leave our problems at the door, because ours, it's like in AA we call it Rule 62, and it's called don't sweat the small stuff. Mm-hmm. Because it's all small stuff. So when I do that every morning and my feet hit the floor and I ask God for this day to be useful, and I go out, and because of my brain everything's in places today, my wife sets up this little maze, but the first thing I do is I look on the fridge and I see Frankie, who is my donor, and I say, I love you, man. You're my hero. To check that dotted line, to say that you'll give somebody the gift of life, mm-hmm. that keeps me going. God intended me to keep going, and I thank Frankie every day, and I do not miss thanking him and talking to his son Bentley, mm-hmm. who's now like my donor son, and he's getting so big, and Sue, and we lost Frank, who is Frankie's father this year, in a motorcycle accident. A courageous individual who had more love in his body. At first, we kind of didn't connect, and then we did, and I turned into his son. Mm-hmm. And he threw his daughter off the back of a bike in a big accident and saved her life while he took a telephone pole. That's heroic. Wow. He knew it. That's those are heroes in my life. My dad was my greatest hero. When I left our Native American heritage, I used to be a little kid chasing feathers around the reservation powwows, and he would always come back, and be there. And at the end, I was able to go back to the reservation and take care of certain things and sit down with medicine men and spiritual people and tell my story to them. And at the end, he says, "Will you sponsor me?" I says, "Dad," he says, "I want what you got."
See, I think you, with what you're doing, are an inspiration to a lot of people, more than you know. And I think that's also due to the examples that were set for you with Abe, your dad, and several others that did that for you, and now you're doing it in return in more ways than you probably will ever know. And whether it's, and I think about the book, this podcast, your efforts, there's so much that happens that we'll just never know.
Well, after 20 years of working in AA, I finally decided to retire. from my job at the what we call the Western Mass Intergroup office, the central office of AA, and I was brought in there by a man named Marion, who was my service sponsor, and that's why it's important to have these people in your lives. And I stayed and I worked that job until I'm going to be crying then, but December 31st is my last day, and my wife says the divorce court, the lawyer's on speed dial if you try to go back January 1st. And I went, okay, baby, and I haven't talked about her enough, but if I can just say that she is the most important person that I'll ever have in my life. God gave me a good one. She could have ran a long time ago, but I can never. I hear her cry sometimes in the bedroom because of, everything that's going on, and there's not enough money in the world that can bring back to certain things that you've lost, but it makes us stronger.
And I think you're hopefully going to make other people stronger.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. Well, I really appreciate everything you shared, man.
You're my dude, man. I love you, bro.
Well, it's. I can't tell you what it's meant to share all that we've shared over the past year or so, and we'll just keep this going, and even after January 1st.
Yeah, well, I'm staying at the recovery center.
Yeah,
I'm actually
I'm going to call you that day too.
I'm going to stay there, but I will be leaving the other office, and spend some more time rebuilding some things from the past, my children and my grandkids and everything else, and taking more time to spend with my wife, who has been very gracious of her time over the years by giving hers to me for other people.
Yep.
And she understands that because she's also part of our fellowship. And she don't mind me saying that because she works as hard at it with other people as we do, and she volunteers at the center, and that's what we do. We need people to come down and volunteer at Hope for Holyoke. We need people to come down and be members. As I would say on my podcast, get off your beanbag chair eating Cheetos and dial our phone number at 561-1020.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing all that, and thanks for listening. And remember, healingvoicesproject.com, and also if you'd like to donate in honor of Johnny Paleface at the GanderasCenter.org. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.